So good morning. My name's Brendan J. Quinn. I've got Waseem Herwitker from First Alliance Financial
Morning.
Services and Luke Hamill. Luke, who's the co-host of the Central London Property Network, and you can find Luke at Be Lucky too. So thanks for joining me, Luke, as well.
Morning, Brendan. Morning,
Morning.
Waseem.
So
Morning, Luke.
the purpose of this call is really just to give the listeners a flavour of who's in the Central London team, and also key questions to be answered as well. So it's only a short synopsis, and we can't go into too much detail. And that's the fantastic value of coming to a live meet. Luke, what would you say some of the key topics coming around property finance you're noticing at the moment?
I think the key things are affordability and watching for the future with the changes that are coming up in the investment, the tax treatment of buy-to-let. So I think lenders are starting to watch. I mean, Waseem's a far better person to ask, but I think that lenders are starting to think about the future risks that we as investors present to them. Because obviously they just want to get paid and they want to make sure they continue to get paid. And with the changes ahead, we as investors need to be considering how we are going to adjust our investments to continue to be profitable, because that's what you want, isn't it? You want to be profitable. So I think these are the types of things that we need to be thinking about.
Sure. Luke, I did a disservice just now because I didn't really say that you're a very, 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 very experienced property investor. Huge portfolio, decade and a half approximately, mostly multi-lets in Northamptonshire. I think you say Surrey as well, if I've got that right.
That's right.
So, Waseem, your background, I haven't really gone into too much details, from a banking background, and then you've moved on to the wealth IFA background. So, and Luke, feel free to interrupt at any time. And Waseem, one of the key questions I've got for you is, who's your typical client and what makes them unsuitable? What would make a client unsuitable for you?
Are we talking property related or general?
Property.
Okay, so typical for us, I mean, our average age client is probably, or the age range is around 35 to about 45, 50 years old. So our client bank is quite young, quite mixed. So from a property investor point of view, they're not massive portfolios. People looking to maybe purchase more properties whilst they're in a full-time job. So that's who we typically got. And that's great in terms of our relationships and longevity and how we look at building our business going forward. An unsuitable client can vary. The obvious one that would spring to mind would be poor credit rating. Obviously, it's one of the first questions that they're going to ask. But I also think, I should have thoroughly thought about this question properly yesterday, but I also think people who come to us who are unprepared, unprepared in terms of what they need to be doing. And it's okay to guide them, but you'll find that what their ambition and what they should expect are far. There's a big disparity between the two areas, and that's what we get a lot of as well. People who think that actually getting on the property ladder is as easy as it was post 2006, 2007, when it isn't. The same rules don't apply anymore. And then you've got, on the other side, you've got the other extreme whereby you do work for your client and then they, for one reason or another, may not want to be parting with the monies to pay your fees and could complain about stuff that you've done which doesn't necessarily stack up. So you get all extremes really from in our case.
Sure. So what I found most interesting in that little piece you've done, credit scores, what naturally would come up, but your average age of investor is 35 to 50, which is surprisingly, I thought it'd be slightly younger, but so that's an interesting demographic for me. And Luke, sorry, Waseem, the other key question I've got for you, I've mentioned about the unsuitable client. What's your average deal lend?
Deal size, you mean?
Yeah, deal size.
The average, it would vary. It's got a range. I don't think we've got an average. I mean, some of our expat clients are looking at, or who we've dealt with in the past, should I say, because they don't always come back frequently. You're looking at 750 to a million and a half. But the everyday client, especially now London pricing people out in a lot of areas, or the rental yields not necessarily stacking up, or the business model's not stacking up, you're looking at roughly 150, 200k sizes in terms of the lending amount.
Sure.
250 up to 300,000.
Luke, before we recorded this, you're asking a few questions to Waseem about the current play of the market. Do you want to just ask Waseem, for the benefit of the audience who weren't, obviously in our prior conversation, some of the key questions you were covering with Waseem?
We're going over quite a bit. Can you be a bit more specific? We're talking about the or the affordability, or?
Sorry, remind me, what was that in terms of the buy-to-let side of things?
Yeah, we were talking about a couple
changes.
Yeah, you were covering about the changes, Luke.
Right. Okay. That within 30 days, capital gains is payable, and the fact that when you sell a property going forward, you've got to be really careful about whether it's investment or trading, because you're going to be charged tax at your income tax rate.
Yeah. So I haven't read. Yeah. Sorry, Luke. Didn't mean to cut you off there. Yeah, so we know, in the last budget, the capital gains tax rate was brought down, but remained the same for property investors or people selling property. So you're going to already pay 18 and 28% when you realise a gain on and you sell property, which is not your main home. With property investors, I can't remember if it's this year or whether it comes in next year, but any gain has to be paid within 30 days of being realised.
I'm under the understanding that it came in on the 31st of July. It was brought in without an act of parliament. It just was brought in through a committee. So
yeah, I'll be honest, I really can't remember.
This is more party. This is more along the lines of what we're saying. There are massive changes. It's politically related. But it does have an impact, and I think we're going to really see the impact coming in about 2 years' time. In fact, I was catching up with Paul Preston over the weekend, and we were talking about this. We're both like some sort of size landlord of multi-lets, and it's really going to start to have an impact in about 2 years. So, you've got to see the positives in this as well, investors, because there will be positives. There will be, for your rent, the existing tenants, the rent, and this is bad news for tenants, which is what the government maybe perhaps are not seeing right now, because we do have a lack of property. That's just like a given, and we're not building enough. So are the rents going to go up and up? And the regulation of rent is a very tricky thing to do. It's obviously, we've tried to do it in the past and it fails because it's market forces, it's supply demand.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
The changes are political, and obviously it's your government has got a 5-year cycle and they're just trying to get elected. That's their main role. And politically it's expedient to say, yeah, we're going to, demonize some certain section of people. But obviously, like, we as landlords, the good landlords, obviously trying to house people, we're doing a job which is not there, which is not being covered by the state. And what we provide is quality accommodation, good accommodation. And more people may be forced out of this. So I think lots of sensible organisations that look to protect the interests of the tenants are standing up for landlords. But we're going to see this falling out, I think, in about 2 to 3 years as the tax changes on the interest, which is allowable for the business purpose of buying a property, as that starts to erode and landlords are starting to lose a lot of money, and then the business is no longer sustainable if you're losing money.
Yeah, I think you've hit on a couple of points. I think when did we meet last? It was last month, actually, wasn't it? So, and one of the things we spoke about is the state of the property market. And one of the things I mentioned, I think to you, or was it Alan Frost who was there, was, I'm not really in a rush to buy at the moment. I'm waiting because I think next year, maybe the year after, it's going to be a key time. So you're absolutely right there. As far as the changes go, I think there's a philosophical point there, but I would agree with. I'm more on your side. I think it's a big political point there as well. The government, I think, genuinely is concerned about house prices for a country that is really a nation of homeowners. You're finding the rental sector really taking hold now. So, 10, 15 years ago, where the rental market was 5%, you're now looking at 17 and encroaching onto 20% renters now. And I think that was partly why it was brought. All these changes were brought in, but it went past that. I think you're right. It was more of a political tool because it's not. You don't only just have the mortgage interest relief that changes next year. You've got stamp duty, and that now applies to limited companies as well as individuals. No wear and tear relief, that's gone, as we know. So all of these little things that were taken away, the fact that capital gains tax could be taxed as income, purely because the government, it's not so much whether it's classed as trading, although they would have to be defined in order to be taxed as income, but even if property is being taxed at 28%, what would the government prefer? 28% receipt or one that could be taxed potentially at 45%? So those are the elements. Then I think it's a big political game, and one that kind of then rests on a fiscal edge, and it is a very big tipping point because when you look at the wider market, there isn't really anything to support even the base rate drop. I don't get why that was actually brought in, and then with that you've got quantitative easing, artificially pushing up prices, lowering the value of the pound. So there's such a balance to be had at the moment, and it is a knife edge at the moment, in my view. So I agree. I think there's a lot to consider.
Luke, I'd love to continue this conversation, and where we're going to continue the conversation is at the next Central London Property Network. I'll be announcing the details shortly. For the listeners out there who are listening to this interview, whether you're listening directly on my YouTube channel or via Twitter, Luke, you're at Be Lucky Too, Waseem. Can you just remind me your Twitter handle? It's
So I've got two. You can catch me personally on at Waseem Herwitker. I'll spell the surname HERWITKER, or I'm also on at First Alliance FS.
Look, so we are going to do these online interviews and possibly make them a bit more interactive, open them up to more than just the trio of us. So that's a possibility. Listeners, your feedback's really, really important. So, what topics would you like covered at the next Central London Property Meet? Or, as I organise Wandsworth as well, the Wandsworth Property Meet, Central London bi-monthly. It takes place in the mornings in Central London, and also an evening meet in Central London as well. You can find me at Brendan Quinn at Brendan Quinn _UK. And there'll be details about other ways to connect through myself, meetup.com/Central London Property Network. Almost 900 members on that particular meet. But your reactions on who you'd like to hear speak or topics would be of value as well. One of the things which we've discussed this morning, but not going to go into any more detail here, is about serviced accommodation, which is a huge hot topic, controversial as well. So I just want to say huge thanks to Waseem Herwitker, Director of First Alliance Financial Services. Luke Hamill, huge thanks for yourself as well. Luke's the co-host of the Central London Property Meet. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Brendan.
Thanks, Brendan. See you guys. See you guys later.
See you all. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.